Good morning. Welcome to another Walkie Talkie. In this one, what was I going to talk about today? I think it's going to be more of a follow-on to what I was talking about previously, which is about unfinished games being released. So that's what I'm going to go on to today. Because I think this is an important subject, and to be honest with you, it's fair to say that it's something that's just not going to get fixed, not by companies themselves. So yeah, we'll see what transpires, but just to kick off, that's what it's going to be about. The other thing I've just noticed is that these cycling gloves that I've got are getting holes in them. I'm going to talk about that. And also what I want to talk about with it as well is how mainstream media has completely failed to call this out. Your Eurogamers, your IGNs, although it's not new, they should be calling this out, because the problem has got exponentially worse. Now, as I say, we'll go into more detail with that as I do my usual detour. It's slowly going away, but it's just mud that's here now. So yeah. I also decided to take the plunge, and I bought, because it's in quite a deep sale at the moment, was the Assetto Corsa Competizione. I think that's how you say it. I've probably butchered it completely, but I thought I'd get that with the money that I'd set aside for Project Motor Racing. I got that, and that with all of its DLC, all of it, of which there was quite a bit, plus the game, is currently on sale on Steam for 40 quid. So it was a no-brainer. And from what I've played of it so far, it plays very well even with a controller. It's tough, it's challenging, it's a racing sim, and it's what I was looking for. And you know what, for a game that's been out for quite a while, it looks pretty good too. And that wasn't a massive AAA studio either. So it's kind of interesting to me that they could get that. And, I know it's on deep sale at the moment, but it's well worth it. The original Assetto Corsa, which is about 11 years old, I think, you can get that for under £4. And I believe there's quite a healthy mod scene for that too. So that might be worth checking out. But anyway, we'll discuss more of that in the park when I get there. So, do my little usual flip around, and I will see you there. Right, here we are in the park again. So, a few things I want to say before I get into the sort of meat and bones of the video today. Vintage joystick. YouTube channel I've just subscribed to. Highly recommend. Has a lot of very thoughtful analysis about the state of the AAA gaming industry these days. His channel's well worth checking out. I've listened to, or watched and listened to about 4 or 5 of his videos, and they're excellent. Puts over a lot of good points. Talks a lot of sense about the AAA gaming industry and what's going on with it. Now, I got referred to this YouTube channel, so again it's let me just double check. I think it's Vintage Joystick. I will just check because I want to get it right. Let me just check on that. The handy thing about Veteran Joystick is the YouTube channel. Yeah, so check that out. Now, I got that channel from listening to a podcast, a monthly podcast called the Retro Gaming Roundup. There's a section on that podcast I listen to religiously called Dinosaur Pie, and that's a podcast that's hosted by Simon Butler. Now, for those of you that may or may not know, actually those of you that don't know, because if you may know, then you'll know. If you don't know, then you won't know. Simon Butler he would describe himself as a pixel pusher, which essentially means that he does pixels for games that have pixels as opposed to polygons in them. Now, Simon can be described as, he has good opinions, he has strong opinions on things, but all of that has been born out of the fact that he's pretty much been working in the games industry since it began here in the UK. And he has a lot of really good opinions on stuff. He's obviously very knowledgeable, having worked in the industry for many, many years. He does like to sell himself short by saying that his stuff is workmanlike. No, it's really not. Simon, I know you'll probably never listen to this video, but your work is not. That is bloody excellent. Your stuff is fantastic. Making new friends. I tell you, the wind's just picked up, so I hope the wind guard on my microphone is working. Yeah, wind's just picked up out of nowhere. Anyway, yeah, he will, he sort of downplays his talent, but he's very, very good. Listen, you don't survive in any industry for the length of time that Simon Butler's been in an industry without you being very good. Especially in an age where polygons took over from pixels in a lot of games. You know, you have to be good to survive, because at some point there would have been a lot of pixel artists who were all scrambling for one job. You know, sort of around the 90s era, when there was that sort of seismic shift away from pixels into polygons. They've come back a little bit in recent years. Well, I say a little bit, a lot really. And that's been via indie games, but whenever there's a big like surge towards a new technology, there's always a lot of people get left high and dry. Because whereas at one point pretty much every game had pixels and only a handful had polygons, when you have quite a shift, then the inverse happens, because everyone wants to show off the new tech and how wonderful they are at doing that new tech. And I remember that, you know, in the sort of the PlayStation era. Yeah, you still got some games that come out with pixels, but overwhelmingly polygons became a thing. People wanted the 3D, you know. When you think about it, when Doom came out on the PlayStation, that was using old tech. But very quickly that changed to polygons. When you look at games that came out like Tomb Raider, for example, that was polygons. Racing games went over to polygons. So, yeah. Anyway, he downplays himself. He doesn't like being referred to as a legend. So I will refer to him as a legend, because I know that on the absolute off chance he watches this video, which he probably won't, because he's, you know, but if he does, I know that'll piss him off a little bit. But you are a legend, Simon Butler, so get over it. But yeah, he was the one who was talking about the YouTube channel, Veteran Joystick. I hope to God I've remembered that. You know, I'm one of them people that will always mix something up. No matter how many times I see it, no matter how many times I'll say it, give me 10 minutes without thinking about it and my brain reverts back to its default setting on stuff. I've always been like that. It drives me mad. Years ago, when AI in games used to be a thing that was new, for God knows why I kept calling it A1. And I knew it was AI. I mean, A1, it makes absolutely no sense. But I kept saying it. And it's like, God almighty, just somebody give me a lump hammer. And every time I say it wrong, I'm going to smack myself over the bloody head with it. It drove me mad. I still do it today. So, just whatever I said earlier on in the video, that's his YouTube channel. I'm not getting my bloody phone out for the third time in 10 minutes and having a look. I'm not. But yes, he referred that channel, and It's excellent. And he makes a lot of really good points about how the AAA industry is basically killing itself through greed. And in addition, how he also mentions about mainstream gaming press and how they're ignoring a lot of this. When games get released that are broken, how many times when you read a review or listen to a review, are game-breaking bugs even mentioned in the review? It's almost like they have an entirely different version of the game that isn't broken. So unless game companies, their review codes that they're sending out are to versions of the games that are actually better than what they're releasing into the mass market, which doesn't make sense. I mean, why would they do that? All these websites are willfully ignoring serious errors within the game. And no, I don't buy the, well, it didn't happen to us. Because there are some issues with games that are universal. Whether you're playing on console, whether you're playing on PC, no matter what the spec is, there are certain issues that are universal. Now, when back in the day, back in the 80s, when I used to read magazines like Zap and Computer and Video Games, sometimes it was prevalent even back then. This is not a new phenomenon by any stretch of the imagination. This is not new. Back then, I remember reading a review for one game where they didn't give it a score. They didn't give it 0. They just left the boxes blank. And at the end it was because their copy of the game that they got, the review copy, wouldn't load in the second part of the game. It just refused to work. So they did a review based on what part of the game they could play. Now, this was probably to obligate getting the review copy of the game. But they just said, we can't score it. And we pretty much can't do a full review because essentially only the first part of the game is loading in and working. And I thought, you know what, that's really good, that was honest. They're not coming out there and saying, oh yeah, this game's shite, 10% or whatever. Because there is a possibility that, especially back then, if it was on magnetic media, they might earn a flaw with the cassette or the disc, whichever was supplied. I would imagine review copies of games would be on disc, but not necessarily. But then you would get a review like RoboCop. Now, RoboCop is a big AAA game. I can't remember the name of this game now that they did that to, with regards to not scoring it because of the glitches. I don't recall the game. But when RoboCop came out on the Commodore 64, there was huge problems with that. There was 2 major bugs in that game that were game breaking. The first one, on one of the levels going in further you got into the game, you were going through this warehouse and you had a very strict timer. So you had to fight your way through this warehouse, get to the door at the end and punch your way through the door like he does in the film. Except the timer was too strict and it was impossible without using a cheat. by the time you get to the door, quite often you might even have like 1 or 2 seconds left, and you just couldn't get through the door quick enough. I tried and tried and tried, couldn't do it. And that was a tough game to even get to that point. That game was tough. So imagine my frustration with that. So the only way you could do it was by entering a cheat code. Now I don't know if that was on the high score table or whatever. And what that did was it disabled the timer, or it gave you, far more time. I can't remember which it did now. So I got through it. You load in the next level and all the graphics are scrambled. The main sprites were okay, but all of the backgrounds were messed up, so you couldn't see where you were going. So you then had to do a level skip to skip that level. Now I'm pretty certain at the time, because that game was very highly rated on the C64, not as good as the Spectrum version that my friend had. It was better on there, which killed me, because being a C64 fan and owner and being a big fan of RoboCop, seeing that the Spectrum version was better. Yeah, okay, the graphics didn't have as many colours, but it played better. It had more speech in it. I remember that really annoying me. It seems silly now in hindsight, but the Spectrum had more speech in on the 128K version. When he started the game, he would read out his prime directives. On the Commodore 64, he just said RoboCop. It's like, the C64's got superior sound. Fantastic sample sounds. Listen to Turbo Outrun, for goodness sake, on the C64. The music to that is astoundingly good. So I was furious. I was like, really? And then you get the game and it's broken on the C64. I don't believe these problems existed on the Spectrum version, but they did on the C64, and I was mad. But the reviews at the time made no mention of these game-breaking bugs. This is what would have been back in the day called a AAA release, except it didn't have the major AAA development size teams that they have today. Just trying to get the right words out then. But it was a AAA game for its day. It was a major movie tie-in. It was like on every system you could think of back then. And I don't know whether any of the other versions had it. I had it on the Amiga and I don't think that had any issues game-breaking bug-wise. So I'm just like, great. Like, it felt like the only one that did have these issues was the bloody version I had. So I was furious. But I was more angry at the fact that there was no mention of this. I mean, even back then I would have been when it came out, about 14 years old. I was mad as hell. Now, why wouldn't the magazines have said that? Why would they never have mentioned this game-breaking bug? Because, for years, I just thought it was my copy. I did. I thought it was just my copy of the game. It was only years and years and years later that it came out that no, it was a widespread issue with the release of the game. Now, I know it was fixed. Now, I don't know whether that was fixed for a re-release, because they would re-release games on budget, or whether it was fixed by the community many, many years later. The point is, mainstream media at that time was silent. So there's only one of two explanations for that. One, they didn't really play the game. They certainly didn't play it through to completion. And they most certainly didn't play it through to the part where you got to that warehouse with a timer issue. If they did, then they willfully ignored game-breaking bugs. Even if by some incredible miracle they got through that warehouse section. The messed up graphics on the subsequent level after, it was either the next level or maybe one even after that, I don't know, can't remember now. They made no mention of that. So how did they complete the game without using a level skip? And if they used a level skip, they must have known there was a problem with the game. When they were playing through that and they encountered this, why didn't they contact Ocean and say, hey guys, we've got a problem here. Now, let's be very, very generous and say that the review copy they got didn't have messed up graphics on the level after the warehouse one. Let's be very generous and say that. Let's say that for whatever reason it was something that happened in the duplication process, which I did hear that was the case. However, that doesn't change the bug with a timer in the previous level to that. That does not explain that at all. So how did they do that? They must have used the level skip. So they didn't play it properly. Or maybe they just got to that, got stuck, and said, oh, sod it lads, we've got a publication deadline to come to. Well, you know, what's everyone else scoring it? Oh, this. Yeah, we'll put it around that same. So it was all of these people getting this game, which was a huge release for Ocean, on the C64. And it was broken and there wasn't a bloody thing said about it. And I've already covered it with the Driver 3 as well. Game-breaking bugs. A couple of magazines, an Xbox and PlayStation magazine, got exclusive access to early review copies of that game. They gave it top marks and did not tell the player about those glitches that were present in the game. Absolutely reprehensible. People were buying that game, getting it home, and it was broken. So what chance have you got? You know, if the outlets that you rely on to give you reviews, an opinion that's honest, if they're not doing that, then what chance have you got? It's like literally you're trying to ski uphill. And that's dog shit. When I had a bit of a look on the forums for Project Motor Racing, I saw a lot of people defending this game. Not only defending the game, but going after those that criticised it. Now, as usual, you get those people that are very offensive. I would assume their posts would be edited or deleted by moderators. But there were some that weren't. And they were being shouted down. Now, they were basically calling out They were basically calling out the nonsense. I'm just adjusting my jacket. I was mindful of the fact that the wind was blowing part of my jacket into the microphone, so I hope that's not created too much of an issue sound-wise. But yeah, all of that going after people who were criticising the game, and all you kept getting out of them was, they'll fix it, they'll fix it, they'll fix it. No, like I said yesterday, no, it shouldn't have been released that way. Why are we accepting it? Again, I'm making the same point, I know, but it can't be stressed enough. These people have become sort of acclimatised to accepting games coming out that are massively broken. And I don't get it. In no other form of entertainment would you accept that. If you bought a Blu-ray, you got it home, and part of the film was missing, you'd take it back. You wouldn't accept it. You would raise awareness to the fact that this was broken. If you bought an album and there were some tracks missing off the CD, you would take it back. And you'd want to put it out there that it was defective. You'd want to make people aware of it. If that's happening all the time with every film that comes out on physical media, or every album that comes out, or if you had books from a publisher and there were pages always missing, or there was text of the book that hadn't printed correctly, you would take it back and you would raise awareness of it. You wouldn't accept it. You'd be saying things like, why is it every time we get a book from these people, why is it every time the damn thing's missing pages? Or why is it every time the CD is missing tracks? It's not good enough. Every time. And that happens in the gaming industry, and people call it out because they're rightfully fed up of this, and they're hauled over the coals over it by these moderators. It's like, don't dare criticise. You know, oh, you go to their forums and you list a litany of complaints about the game, and you say, this isn't good enough, this should not have been released, and you're treated like some sort of pariah. No, it's all wrong. If you're somebody that accepts this, sit down and think about other things in your life where that would be continuously broken, not working. Think about everything that you buy and pay money for. If every time you got one, it was broken and didn't work properly, and you had to go through all the messing about of a refund, or you basically sat with something that's broken, waiting for it to be fixed, on the off chance it gets fixed to a satisfactory level to what was promised. Think about that. Would you be happy? No, you wouldn't. You'd be extremely unhappy and you'd be frustrated. So why, oh why is it different when it comes to games? And this is what winds me up, is this attitude. You're not doing anything wrong by calling people to account. You're not. And if you think you are, it's because you've been mentally conditioned to be that way. You actually have been the victim of conditional way of thinking. And it's entirely illogical. But over and over again you see it. And a lot of this has come from the mainstream media, I'm afraid, that calls being critical of games, being critical of publishers, if calling out things that are nonsense, that are clearly not going to be beneficial to an industry that you love, be it the games industry or movies or whatever, any kind of thing in entertainment or beyond. When you have mainstream media calling out people that are critical, calling them toxic, that's where your problem lies. Because they're not out for your interests. They are consumer facing in name, but publisher and investor backing in action. And those two things are not the same. You can't serve both. Your job as a video game website that reviews games, comes out with video game news, your one and only job is to act in the interests of the consumer. To give fair, balanced, unbiased reviews, to report on the news, and opinionate on how all of that affects the consumer. That's your job. Nothing else. If you become a mouthpiece for a publisher and therefore by that association, investors, faceless investors that finance these publishers and put publishers in these positions and put developers in positions where they cannot deliver on the game, then you are part of the problem. There is a trust issue. Quite recently we've seen this issue with a game called Ark Raiders that is, by all measurements of virtually everybody that's played it and played Black Ops, say Ark Raiders is by far the superior and more entertaining and fun game to play. Yet that was marked down deliberately because it used AI in relation to something to do with voiceovers. So these websites marked it down. Eurogamer, I think, was particularly guilty of this. You then have Black Ops 7, which is being absolutely hammered by players saying how bad it is, how rubbish it is, how it's the worst Call of Duty game ever, etc, etc, whatever other hyperbole you wish to use. That also uses AI, yet that wasn't marked down because of it. How dishonest is that? Now, they will come up with some explanation in their own mind that they will have sat down and around a little table and discussed in their weird, bizarre universe that they live in, how that's fair. They'll have come up with some concept. But it's not. It's hypocrisy. And it reeks of a company that, to my mind, is looking out for its own financial interests ahead of that. And its own financial interests, and also its access to Activision, and by extension access to Microsoft, because Microsoft own Activision. That's what is governing Eurogamer's philosophy. Make no mistake about it. And they will have the spin, like they always do, but it's a lie. It's just a lie, and it's paper thin. It's so easy to pick holes in it because they've been like this for so long. They've been like this for so long that they themselves don't even know when they're doing it. It's just become par for the course. These people, once upon a time, what was it, 10, 11 years ago, how many of these mainstream outlets published a very similarly penned and opined article that said gamers are dead? Which was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life, at a time where the games industry was flourishing, at a time when we were on the cusp of launching a new generation of consoles. The PS4, which was a console marketed by Sony for the gamers, went on to be massively successful. But according to the brain trusts at mainstream media, gamers were dead. That's a hell of a lot of dead people buying a console then. And all of this was because the issue of trust in mainstream media was questioned, and they knew they'd been caught. I mean, why it took so long, I don't know. I mean, I've already given you examples, just two off the top of my head. I've already mentioned before about the conflicts of interest with Zap64 and Thalamus. They were both owned by the same publishing company. These are not thick people. These are not sat at a desk banging their head on the keyboard, or trying to type with their elbows or whatever. That level of thick. They know what they're doing. And I wouldn't even go so far as to say that they were horrible people. I mean, I don't know them. Maybe some are, maybe some aren't, but they're all caught up in this conflict of interest, in this trap. Who are you serving? Who is your master? Well, it sure as hell isn't the people that should be. Their master is the big money that's behind these game publishers. You've seen down the years people that have been working for these publications end up getting jobs working at game publishers. Interesting. And they will say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, it's kind of a bit like a politician that ends up on the board of directors for a business that they've awarded a government contract to worth billions, and suddenly they end up on the board of directors. And they reap the benefit of that contract in dividends. How many times have we seen that? We've seen it quite recently with a certain illness that swept the world. There's been an inquest in the UK which has revealed this conflict of interest. It happens. So how could you trust that politician or any politician that acts like that? You can't. And in the same way, you can't trust any mainstream games media outlet that does that as well. You can't trust them. It's a conflict of interest for you. The people that are supposed to be looking out for you are looking out for themselves first. They're lining their own pockets. They're feathering their own nest. And when a conflict does arise, they will never, ever fall on the side of you. And I know I've said all this before, but it's true. This is why games released broken are seldom called that way. It's seldom stated. And all the answer you get from them is, well, it didn't happen to me. That's it. That's their defense. Didn't happen with the version I had. Didn't happen on the console I was playing on. It happened on everybody else's. So you must have a Magic Games console then. Didn't happen on my PC. Which is slightly more understandable given the varying configurations that PCs have. Is almost infinite. I mean, crikey, you can get a little bit of software that on your PC that can stop something working properly that you didn't even know was running. Yesterday, on my PC, while I was loading in Assetto Corsa, at the same time I was processing a video, Assetto Corsa wouldn't load. The minute that video finished processing, boom, straight into the game. No other game I've got has ever done that, but that one did. But that's an explainable issue. But when you have so many people, regardless of what their setup is, having the same problem, and you think that it's okay to ignore it because it didn't happen to you, well, no, I'm not buying it. Not for a single minute. We need to be holding these companies accountable, because that's the only way things will improve. AAA is dying, and it doesn't need to. It doesn't need to. It's just been managed by people that are risk averse and that don't give companies enough resources to deliver a product on the timescale that they want, that comes out in a workable fashion. And the main reason people are walking away from buying AAA games, because they're not walking away from buying games. Indie games are flourishing. Look at Silksong, for example. Look at Stardew Valley. Games are flourishing as a whole. But the AAA isn't. And that's the reason. You're charging humongous amounts of money for the game. You know, you're elevating games now in the UK to £70 without season passes or DLC. Again, something they said, if they raise the price of games by £10 to £15, they could do away with the whole season pass and DLC. They did, and they didn't, because they lied, as they always do. Like I've said in a previous video, when they lied about DVDs, DVD-ROMs and CD-ROMs. Price of games will come down, they said. Didn't. It came down, well, actually they did. They came down very briefly, and then they went straight back up again within one generation with a whole plethora of nonsense excuses. So, there you have it. Anyway, that'll do for this one. Been out for quite a bit, so thank you for watching, and hopefully, weather permitting, I will be back for my Sunday stroll, so I'll catch you then.